Well, hello there, and welcome to another exciting, riveting episode of the Legal Gym podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 of the most common, most deadly mistakes I see people making when they are trying to build a brand through their entrepreneurship endeavors. And for the show notes for today's episode, which will include all of the links and resources for everything that I'm going to be discussing today, make sure you head on over to hawthornelaw.net. I got that wrong. hawthornelaw.net/38. That's hawthornelaw.net/38. All right, now let's go ahead and dive in. But real quick, normally this is where I post a little ad about something I'm working on or a webinar or how to call me. But today I've got something a little bit different for you. And it's an announcement that I made. So when I'm recording this, it's not going to come out until the future, but it's an announcement that as of the date that I'm recording this, I just made on all the socials, and that is that I am writing a book, and I'm really excited about this. It's been several years since I've written a book. I've written several books, actually. This will be the third time I have published a book, and many of you probably don't know that. And anyway, I'm still playing around with ideas of what I want to do and the naming and things like that. But I'm in the process of getting that all set up. And my goal is to get it published within 90 days. Now, that is ambitious, and we'll see if that can happen or not. But let me tell you a little bit about what's going on with this book. So the name of the book, I haven't quite settled on yet, but it's going to be something like Make Your Mark, potentially. And the idea being that I'm going to be teaching entrepreneurs how to use trademarks to leverage their brand to new financial levels, basically. How the financial benefits of what happens when you leverage a trademark. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about, as well as some of the nuts and bolts about how to get the trademark registered and different things you need to be looking for. But that's basically the idea. So if you want to get on the ground floor and maybe get some sneak peek access to chapters as I'm writing them to kind of see what's going on, and then get discounts off the book when it's actually ready to go live and when I launch it, as well as I'm probably also going to kind of build in, like, as I'm working, what I'm doing. And I think there was a book, and I can't remember the name of the book, but it's called Show Your Work, and I can't remember the name of the author. But basically the idea being that as you're doing something like this, a creative endeavor like this, you let people in on the back end to see kind of what it is that you're working on. And that's kind of the idea that I have behind this book, which is different than what I did with the other 2 books. The other 2 books, I basically was a hermit and did everything, early morning hours. I would write like 1,000, 2,000 words. And I did that for, 4 or 5 months. And then I edited for another 4 or 5 months. And then eventually we published the book. And so that's kind of the process I used before. And when I published, nobody knew I was writing a book. I just kind of came out and was like, hey, I published a book. This time I want to bring you with me, bring you along for the ride. And so that's my goal. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. And if you want to join me, there's a link. Go to hawthornelaw.net/mark, M-A-R-K, and that should give you access to the, and actually, let me just make sure that's correct here. Yes, hawthornelaw.net/mark will take you to a sign-up page where you can just enter your name and email and get access to, everything that's going on the back end. So excited to have you join me there, but let's get back to today's episode, shall we? And talking about the 3 deadly mistakes I see people making. They're not really deadly, but that's just, dramatic effect. The 3 deadly mistakes that I see people making with their trademarks. So let's hop back at that. So these all go hand in hand. I'm just going to put it that way. I could literally list these out one by one, and you would kind of get where I'm going. But I want to explain why each of these is so important as well, and talk through them a little bit. So the first one is picking a name you can't protect. So if you've listened to anything else I've done or seen a lot of my YouTube videos, you know that in the trademark world, there's 5 categories of names that the trademark office will look at. So any name that you post to the trademark office for potential registration or submit an application, they're going to look at and they're going to categorize it as one of these names. And so it's everything from, on the one end, you've got fanciful names. These are basically made-up names. To, on the other end, generic names, which are not capable of being trademarked. And those are basically, if you're selling, coffee mugs, and you want to name your store the Coffee Mug Store, that's not going to work. It's a generic name. So, and then there's a whole bunch of things in between. Now, if you use the wrong name, so if your name is too generic or too descriptive of what it is you're selling, those are both two categories of goods and services. Not categories, but those are two categories of trademark names. If it's too descriptive or too generic, the trademark office is going to reject your application. And so you want to make sure that your name is not too descriptive of what it is you're selling. A lot of people like to use descriptive names because practically speaking, if you're just getting started and you don't have much of a marketing budget, you want to make sure the public knows what you're doing. And so the further you go beyond that into the suggestive names, the fanciful names, the arbitrary names, those are all going to require at least some level of investment in telling the marketplace what it is that you're actually doing and what you're selling. And so for a lot of people, for that reason, they don't like to use those names and they default to these generic descriptive names. The problem is a generic and descriptive name is not capable of trademark protection. So, and then on the other hand, there's also names out there, and I've used this example before, like the Accelerator Coaching Group. Well, there's like a gazillion people that are selling coaching groups and calling them accelerators. So it's so ubiquitous or well-known in the marketplace that you're not really going to be able to stand out. And even if you could register that name, and I'm not saying you could because there's so many other people that might lay claim to that, it's just going to be hard to break into that marketplace. There's going to be a lot of policing involved and things of that sort. So you want to make sure that the name that you're going to be using is capable of being trademarked. Just at a bare minimum, you need to make sure of that. So that's mistake number one. People don't think about that, and they pick overly descriptive or overly generic names, and then it's, they come to me and say, why can't I register this, or can I register this? And I tell them no, and they're all flustered and worried about that and not sure why that is, but that's the reason. That's the reason why you need to make sure you're picking a name that is actually capable of protection. That's mistake number one. Mistake number two is that they begin using that name then without conducting a search. And it still blows me away to this day that so many people do this, and they just don't conduct searches of their names, and as a result, they are unaware that there's other people that are actually using their name and potentially could shut them down at some point. And what you need to understand is they're not going to shut you down anytime soon. So these small people that have been working and they've, building a brand and they never did their search and they never did anything to protect their trademarks, and they're not making that much money yet. And they'll tell you, hey, I've been selling for several years and nobody's ever said anything about my name and I've never gotten a cease and desist. You're fine. You don't need to do a search. Well, that's bullshit, basically. And the reason for that is that these bigger companies aren't going to come after you. In all likelihood, they're not going to come after you when you're still small for several reasons. Number one, they don't know who you are. And number two, you don't have a whole lot of money. Now, if they do know who you are, they probably will come after you. I will say that. But a lot of times, when you're so small that nobody knows who you are, these big companies, you're not going to be on their radar. So they're not going to see that you actually exist. When they will see that you exist is when you're starting to make some noise in the marketplace and you're starting to generate some real sales. At that point, they will take notice, and then they know that they've got some damages as well that they can recover from you because your business is doing well. And that's what happened to a friend of mine who was selling water bottles on Amazon and was doing $100,000 a month in sales. That was when he got the cease and desist letter from the attorneys for Hydro Flask telling him to shut down. When he had, thousands and thousands of dollars of inventory in his garage and that he was stuck with that he could not rebrand. So you need to be really careful about. You need to make sure you're conducting a search. You need to make sure that if you're selling a physical product of some sort, you need to make sure that you aren't copying somebody else's trade dress. So these are all things you need to be looking into. So number one, don't pick a name that you can't protect. And number two is don't use that name without conducting a search. And then number three kind of goes hand in hand with number two. And that is as soon as you finish the search, you need to file a trademark application. So that third mistake is people just never file their trademark application. They do the search. They think everything is good. They don't find anybody using their name. They're in the clear. And then they don't do anything with that. So a search is only as good as, how old it is. And the older the search is, the less helpful it's going to be, because people can hop in and they can file conflicting trademark applications and they can do all sorts of things in the time between when you did your search and when you actually file a trademark application, which is why I try and get my clients to do the searches and filing the trademark applications as soon as possible, as close together as possible, I should say. And I liken it to the example I used on my video this week was, if you wanted to sell your house and you knew that the market was doing really well in March of 2022, which was the height of the most recent real estate market, and you said, okay, I'm going to sell it. You got an appraisal done. You had a realtor come in and look at your house, and they're like, oh, yeah, we can sell this in like a weekend. It's going to be great. You're like, okay, good. And then you don't do anything. Then you sat in the house for 6 months and was like, oh, well, we decided not to sell for some reason. And then you come back 6 months later, like, okay, you want to sell. And this was now October. It's a very different story in the marketplace right now. And so that is going to be an issue you're going to have. It's the same thing with trademarks. Things change. The market changes. The landscape at the trademark office changes. The length of time it takes to get a trademark changes. So you really need to make sure when you do that search that when the results are still fresh and they haven't gone bad, that you file that application as quickly as possible. So there you have it. The three mistakes I see people make, the three deadly mistakes I see people make all the time with their trademark applications. Number one, picking a name they can't protect. Number two, using a name without conducting a proper search. And then number three, doing that search, but then never filing their trademark application at all. So those are the three mistakes I see all the time. And don't make these mistakes. Don't do this. Listen to what I say and hopefully follow this advice, and you will be in the clear with your trademarks. If you are interested in learning more about how to legally claim the rights to your brand, then you're going to want to schedule a free branding strategy call with me. That's right. For a limited time, I'm offering a free strategy call to talk with me about the branding for your online business and how to make sure it is legally protected. So if you'd like to learn more, head on over to hawthornelaw.net/TM-video. Once again, that's hawthornelaw.net/TM-video. On that landing page, we have lots of great information about the process of protecting your brand so that you don't have to worry about getting a cease and desist letter or being forced to rebrand your business at a great expense. Once again, that website is hawthornelaw.net/TM-video, and I look forward to talking with you soon. All right, all you Legal Gym listeners, now that you know more about some of the common mistakes people make when building a brand, you're ready to implement. Because if there's one thing we love to do over here at the Legal Gym, it's to take massive action. So if you haven't already, make sure to check out the show notes page for today's episode. You can get a rundown of all the links and resources we talked about here today by visiting hawthornelaw.net/38. That's hawthornelaw.net/38. It's going to be the home base for all of your legal and business tools and resources to help you start, build, and of course, legally protect your online business. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you, talking with you in the next episode. Have a great day, folks.